Weird shit I've seen working for the British Navy. I was in the British Navy for 13 years, serving as a British Marine. The story I'm going to share with you was experienced by myself and mates I served with. There are various details I have to leave out due to legal constraints. Most of this still isn't open to the public. It starts in June 2004. I've been given notice I'm to do a 2-week stint serving on the HMS Lancaster for specialist duties. The next day, during my career, I was trained for specializing diving techniques and have done a lot of maritime training with the SBS, Specialized Boat Service. LADS. A lot of the ops I'm set on involve some sort of diving or at least some underwater alignment to them. When I pressed my CO, commanding officer, for more details on what I'll be doing on a little shitty frigate for 2 weeks, he told me not to ask and just go. I'll be told everything when I get there. So eventually, I get on the HMS Winston at Portsmouth. I'm met by 2 SBS lads, one of which I know, let's call them Frank and Eddie. Frank being the one I know, both are pretty big lads and can easily handle themselves. One look will tell you that they've been through hard times. We get ourselves sorted and the frigate leaves. We sit down for dinner and ask them if they know anything about what we'll be doing there. They were given the same orders I was. All they know it is a waterborne op somewhere in the UK waters. The actual location is non-disclosable, but I can tell you it was off the coast of Scotland. That evening, we were given a briefing by the Naval Intelligence Officer. We'll call him Craig. Craig tells us we are going and what we'll be doing for 2 weeks, which includes conducting underwater reconnaissance of volcanically active seabeds, caves. This sounds like bullshit to the 3 of us straight away. Doesn't take a specialist British Marine diver and 2 maritime counter-terrorism operatives to poke around some caves. We voice our concerns, but Craig insists it's a routine study of possible seismology and volcanic active underwater terrain. We don't press the matter, but something is definitely up. We arrive at the target location and get all our scuba gear on. We're given these little instruments that read CO2 levels in the water. We are to look for concentrated points on a passive seabed. We were tasked with checking. We have comms to the frigate and must stay in constant contact. We go below the surface and make our way down to the seabed. It's not far, about 25 meters. We begin the methodology swap for the bed and communicate CO2 readouts back to the Lancaster. After about 10 minutes, we don't find any readouts that we consider to be significantly high, and the Lancaster directs us to a different patch of terrain. It goes down a little, about 30 to 35 meters below the surface. Light is pretty poor, and we have to use these clanky underwater torches strapped to our wetsuits. We were searching for a couple of minutes before we began to get out and get an uneasy feeling, like we shouldn't really be here. I stop and look around. Frank is doing the same, as if he feels it too. We talk a little, mostly to calm ourselves down. Eddie continues to do readouts over our conversations. Suddenly, he stops, mid-readout, but keeps his comms line open. He's clearly distressed by something. We swim over to him, ask him if he's okay, but we get him and literally stop mid-swim. My body's completely and immediately cold, like someone flicked a switch. In front of Eddie is this rotting, bloated, disfigured corpse of a grown man. He's been tied down to the bottom of the sea bed. He has chunks of himself missing. His face is disfigured. His throat is cut open. His belly is torn and its intestines are hanging out. He's completely naked. His penis has a large spiked hammered onto it. We just hung there, bobbing up and down off the seabed for about 10 seconds, taking it in. Frank opens his comm line with the frigate. He tells them what we found. There's not an immediate reply, and we wait for a few seconds. Before Craig comes over the net, he tells us to retrieve the body and bring it back to the frigate, which is what we do. We're all pretty quiet that night. The body was put into a trolley that was led away from Craig. Fragments and the frigate's commander, whose name escapes me now, a small group of guys. We didn't see the body again. And when we were asked if they identified a man, Craig brushed us off. We knew the man was identified. Again, cannot disclose. And we believe the body was taken back to the mainland, UK. Eddie was clearly still affected by the ordeal the day afterwards. Again, he was set into the abyss. Told that we would be searching for a formation of underwater caves nearby where we found the body. Our sorts began pretty normally, except for the readout. We banned the idea that we were here to check the CO2 levels and confronted Craig. He dropped the story and told us that this area was a hotspot for marine life, activity not yet documented. We asked if it was in any way linked to the body we found, but again he brushed off after this. We point blank refused to go down there unarmed. As a result, we were given spring-loaded harpoons that could easily kill a man at 10 meters. I've used them before and know from the experience that these are lethal. We enter the cave and detect an immediate drop in temperature. The caves are pretty straightforward, just one large cavern after another. We search around for about 5 minutes before anything happens. Through a small opening in a rock face, we hear a high-pitched shriek from deep within the cave. Because underwater, it's muffled and sounds like a gurgling sound, but it's still clearly audible. We all freeze and look between each other. We wait about a minute before we hear it again. It echoes off the cavern's walls and bounces around, making it hard to judge in which particular direction it's coming from. Frank opened comms with Lancaster and reports what we've just heard. Craig comes into the net again and asks if we've had any visual contact. Frank tells him we haven't, and he comes back to telling you to explore further and find evidence of the creature that made the sound. We stare, unbelieving, at each other. We're pretty rough blokes. We've been through the wars, but fuck, we're shitting ourselves. We reluctantly swim into the next cavern, harpoons pointed forward, fingers on the triggers. It's plain to us that it isn't naturally formed cavern. The walls are too smooth, and there's a pillar-like structures at regular intervals along the sides of the cavern. We explore further and find what appears to be markings along the walls of the cavern, like cave paintings. They're hard to make out, but they show underwater humanoid-like creatures. Something one might describe as mermaid. There are other markings on the wall that resemble some form of written language. Symbols appearing often, marked in a structured format. We're about halfway through the cavern when we hear the shriek again. Only closer this time. Second afterwards, it's met by another longer and higher pitched shriek that sounds nearer to us. We stop and scan the cavern. Our torches are strong and easily illuminate the entire cavern and show multiple entrances, exits. Eddie, to my left, begins to flow about. He shoots his harpoon, which flies through the water, hitting the ceiling off the cavern. Me and Frank turn to look at him and see blood leaking from his arm. His eyes are wide open. I followed his gaze and saw a small figure dart through one of the holes in the cavern. We asked him if he's okay and what happened. He's breathing heavily and pleads with us to leave. We don't need much convincing and began to leave. As we are exiting, shrieks began to ring throughout the caverns. Too many for us to count, like a swarm of fuckers. We began to panic and swim out of there as fast as we fucking can. I'm ages of a man we found through my head. We exit the cave and swim as fast as our legs would take us to the surface. The shrieks died out after we leave the cave, but we don't slow down. We break the surface and scramble into the deck. We drop our scuba kit and whip off our goggles. Craig comes to meet us, asking him what happened. Frank loses his shit and almost decks the guy. Eddie calls the medic over to take a look at his arm. He cuts off the arm of his wetsuit to reveal bite marks on his forearm. I turn to Craig, who is still getting bull-locking from Frank. He holds up his hands and tells him to calm down. This fires up Frank even more. I step in and tell Frank to go help Eddie. Craig strides off back into the full of the frigate, but this time particularly the whole crew of 130 are out on the deck to check out what's going on. Later that evening, Craig calls us into the briefing room. He tells us the op's been cancelled. We are returned to Portsmouth. Eddie was given a tetanus shot. His arm was wrapped in bandages. He made a full recovery. I never saw Craig again, and I left the British Navy a year later. 3 years after I left the Navy, I bumped into Frank in Bournemouth for a weekend. We went out and got drunk and talked about it all again. He told me that since then, the British Navy had been conducting exploratory operations in the area we were operating in, and he personally knew some of the lads that were using on a regular basis to continue with the sources for marine life not yet documented. Eddie had got out as well. He was working for the Blackwater private security company. He tried speaking to Eddie about what had attacked him, but he's very reserved about it and doesn't like to discuss it. We never found out what exactly it was, but we do know there was nothing like it that science knows of. I've since had visits from various different naval and army intelligence personnel to discuss with me what I saw and their appointments of keeping strictly under wraps. This is the first time I publicly disclosed this information, including my family and close friends. I imagine I will be getting a visit in the morning by some less than savory characters, but at least I didn't say the real secret stuff. After all, I do value my life. Hey guys, Banner 6.7. That was a pretty interesting story. I got that one off, read it, and that definitely sounded like some pretty freaky shit. Now, I don't know how true these stories are, but that one sounded pretty true. Hope y'all enjoyed it.